Good morning, one and all. Welcome to this circle, to this place we gather. Welcome to those of you who find themselves home. Welcome to those who find themselves here for the first time or the first few times. We'll make a space for you. On this Thanksgiving weekend, there's a place in the circle for all of us, and may we find a welcome and a safe place to enter into whatever we need this morning. This is a place where we've learned that we can question, a place where we can wonder, to express our gratitude, our awe, our grief, our joy, and everything in between. It's a place to be together in community, and that's what community means. We come this morning as we are, and we're welcome just that way. In the midst of life's ups and downs, twists and turns, the exciting and scary adventure that is life, especially on the roads this morning, we seek always signposts of our spiritual journeys. We continue exploring these signs as we ponder this morning the places where we share the road, where we're invited to share the road, and where we feel compelled to share the road. It's in gratitude for who we are together, for this place, for this land, for our Treaty 6 brothers and sisters, for our Métis friends of Papas Chase, and all who call this land their ancestral home and adopted home. We find honor in expressing our thanks today. On this Thanksgiving Sunday, we continue to express what gratitude we have for this life, in words and in prayers, in hugs, in family time, in time with friends, in the wisdom that we share, and now, as we do now, in the songs that we sing. Let's gather in thanksgiving. As we center ourselves today, we do so in many ways. We do it with song, we do it with quiet, we do it with words. As we share some centering words this morning, would you respond to each of my thoughts with the phrase, "We come in gratitude"? In the light of this new day, we come in gratitude. In this time that we take to reflect on our lives and consider how we're living, we come in gratitude. In this circle where we open to the Spirit within us and between us and among us, we come in gratitude. In the wisdom we share from Jesus of Nazareth, from teachers of wisdom, both ancient and modern all, we come in gratitude. In this circle that we create, that it might be safe for all to enter, knowing we're diverse and varied, that we're a rainbow of humanity, we come in gratitude. And in this time where we sing and pray, where we ponder and share, where we come to the safety and warmth of this circle in the midst of a world that finds crisis and war at many turns, we come in gratitude. Let's join our words together as we share these words that strengthen our intentions to live more closely as we pray. There are so many ways to experience the miracle that is life. We meet it rising from a previously inaccessible view, standing firm in the cold sweat of our fear, welling up at someone else's need, acting beyond our preconceived limitations. We are created by this miracle, this urgent pull toward life. We weigh its blessing as gift and cast curses upon its challenges. Would that we had more confidence in our ability to make the right choices, to do the right thing, to be strong enough to face the outcomes of life. Then we could live without fear and celebrate the fullness encased in each moment. May we find in this day an awareness of the freedom we are given to know life unshackled from fear, and embrace the possibilities of the present with every breath we take. We pray as those who share a common journey. Amen. We light this candle because we celebrate light, the light of wisdom among us today in each of us, the light that stretches back farther than any of our memories, that reaches to the bang of creation, to the light of wisdom that encompasses and encircles the teachers that we've known through their memories, their stories, their writings, experiences that circle Abraham and Moses and Jesus of Nazareth, and that encircle Muhammad and Buddha and the wisdom of spiritual endeavor throughout the world. We light this candle because we celebrate the light that dwells within each of us, that we continue to seek on our journey. May this light be a reminder of the great river that we step into, the great history of spirit, and the great future that awaits us. invite anyone who wants to come to the carpet for our Time for All Ages. This is a time to come. If you're small, if you're tall, doesn't matter. Let's come and have a talk on the carpet. Good morning. I wanted to talk to you about Thanksgiving because it's Thanksgiving weekend, and probably we have maybe some family dinners or some fun, exciting things with family that we haven't seen in a while, or we certainly get a day off from school on Monday or from whatever we're doing. So Thanksgiving is an important time to stop and to say and to feel thanks in ourselves for all the wonderful things that we have in this life, in this world. And I was going to read to you a story about Thanksgiving, and then I realized that the author has a video of him telling the story himself of Thanksgiving. So I thought, better not to have my words, better to have the author's words. And we're going to see who that author is. But he is an indigenous person who is Mohawk, and he has told the ancient story of gratitude from his people. And it's wonderful, and it's lovely, and he talks about many of the things that we also have to be grateful for in our lives. So I thought we could watch it all together. So let's see.
Well, as we make our way through this Thanksgiving weekend, we'll think about all the things that we are grateful for. We're grateful we have time to learn and time to play with each other right now, and so we want to invite everybody, kindergarten to grade 5. These are the words of Robert Foote. in a collection of his poems called The Hidden Light. This poem is entitled An Interruption. A boy had stopped his car to save a turtle in the road. I was not far behind and slowed and stopped to watch as he began to shoo it off into the undergrowth. This wild reminder of an ancient past, lumbering to some late Triassic bog, till it was just a rustle in the grass, till it was gone. I hope I told him with a look as I passed by how glad I was that he'd stopped me there, and what I felt for both of them. Something I took to be a kind of love, and of a troubled thought I had for our humanity, of how we ought to let life go on, where and when it can. This is the witness of a contemporary poet. From writings that come to us late in the 1st century, this story about someone we know as Paul, whose name really, according to his birth family, was Saul. This is a story we've heard many times about him on his famous journey on a road to Damascus. Saul was breathing out threats and undertaking murder against those who were the followers of the way, those who embraced the teachings of Jesus of Nazareth. And so Saul went and asked for letters from the chief priests of the synagogues that he might take to Damascus, so that if he found there any who belonged to the way, whether they were men or women, he might arrest them and bring them to Jerusalem. And as he was making his way to Damascus, a light pierced his darkness, and he fell to the ground, and he heard a voice calling his name, "Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me?" And he answered, "Who are you?" And the reply came, "I'm the one you're persecuting. But get up and enter the city, and you will know what to do." Those who were traveling with him stood speechless because they heard the voice, but they didn't see anyone. Saul got up from the ground, and though his eyes were open, he could see nothing. So they led him by hand and brought him into the city of Damascus. And for 3 days he was without sight, and he neither ate nor did he drink. Living in Damascus was a follower of the way of Jesus by the name of Ananias. He received a vision calling on him to get up and go into the street called Straight, and to go to the house of a man named Judas, and to look for a man named Saul, who was from Tarsus. But he resisted. And he said, I have heard so much about this man, about all the violence he has done, all the harm he has caused to those who were followers of the way in Jerusalem. And now, here he has come with authority from the chief priests to arrest all of those who follow in this way. But he was persuaded. And Ananias went, and he entered the house, and he put his hands on Saul, and he called him brother. And he took him to where the others were gathered. And when he got up, his sight returned, and after taking some food, Saul regained his strength. This is a story passed down to us from the 1st century. It's been about 4 months now since we left South Africa, and I'm now ready to talk to you about the experience of driving there. First, there's the obvious adjustment to having to operate a right-hand drive vehicle on the left-hand side of the road. And then you add the challenge of shifting the standard transmission with your left hand. And then you factor in the disorientation that you experience every time you try to turn on a blinker and you get the windshield wiper. And then you notch up the experience a little bit when you get out onto the highway, and the posted speed limit is 120 kilometers per hour. But you dare not drive any slower than 140 kilometers an hour, or they will run over you. And you can hardly blame them, because you do have to hurry up, because you want to get off the road before it gets dark again, because it's spring in the southern hemisphere and daylight's growing shorter, not longer. And then the biggest challenge comes when you move off the major highways onto those narrow, winding roads with no shoulders that you have to share with every truck and taxis that stop at will wherever they like, buses that count on their size advantage, cows, sheep, pigs, goats, chickens, children, wheelbarrows, men and women, bicycles being ridden or pushed, carrying all manner of goods for miles and miles and miles. So the greatest challenge comes in learning to share the road. And that's when you actually start to learn the rules of the road. Rule number 1, pay attention. Everything depends on it. Rule 2, be responsive, because nothing is static, everything keeps changing. Rule 3, it doesn't matter who has the right of way. You can do every bit as much harm by being in the right as you can by being in the wrong. Rule 4, This is it. This is the whole enchilada. We are all in this together. We are all connected. Whatever we are hoping to do, wherever it is we're hoping to go, we've got to get there on the same road. We've tended to think of that ancient story of the Damascus Road as a kind of metaphor for those experiences we all have that are life-changing. Those pivotal events in our lives that alter us and alter our course in ways that we would never have imagined. But I think that ancient story also has a more pedestrian truth to teach. It's really also about learning the rules of the road and learning how to share the road. Maybe Saul hadn't been much of a traveler up to that point. He was a homegrown defender of the orthodoxy of his tradition, and he was very much a product of his socialization and the limited exposure he'd had to any kind of diversity. He'd been immersed in first century Judaism and seeing history and meaning entirely through the lens of that narrative that he'd been born into. You get the sense that he has been on a pretty narrow path shared only by like-minded kindred spirits, both geographically and ideologically. He's been traveling between his hometown in Tarsus and the center of his spiritual tradition in Jerusalem. But now, he's on a different road. He's on the long road from Jerusalem to Syria, to its capital in the city of Damascus. But he's a man with his mind on the destination, not on the road. He would have traveled any distance to safeguard his truth from any and all challenges, and indeed, in his fundamentalist zeal, he had found himself on a murderous mission to eradicate a heresy. He was on his own destructive road, traveling from Jerusalem to Damascus to silence the claims of the Jesus cult by executing more of its leaders. Now, Saul is not a deeply disturbed young man like Mark Lapine or Timothy McVeigh or Omar Mateen. He's no misfit. He's not mentally ill. He doesn't have a seething anger against an institution that's treated him unfairly. He's the fair-haired boy, the up-and-coming one in the leadership of his tradition. He isn't part of some fanatical fringe. He's a bright young scholar with a substantial pedigree. He's a trusted religious leader who thinks he's doing his great duty. He's not on some private or deranged rampage. Tragically, he's on an authorized mission to do what he thought was the most important work in the world, to eradicate a heresy, to rid his faith tradition of a threat to its purity, to silence dissent. His murderous mission was interrupted by a life-changing experience. And somehow, a peculiar light penetrated his piety, and he was never the same again. Something stopped him in his tracks, pierced his certainty, and shattered his clarity. And although his eyes were opened, he could see nothing. Isn't that the very experience that every religious person needs to have? Eyes open, seeing nothing. Isn't that the moment when Saul, in many respects, ceases to be religious and becomes spiritual? The Damascus Road didn't make a Christian out of a Jew. It made a seeker out of someone who had been subject to certainty, It made a mystic out of a scholar. It made a humble learner out of an arrogant leader. It made a pilgrim out of a traveler. Because it awakened Saul to the experience of the others on the road. It got his attention, turned his reactiveness into a new kind of responsiveness, altered his sense of rightness of his way and the possibility that there were other right ways, and in time, deeply connected him to his enemy. It changed this guy so much he had to change his name from Saul to Paul. And history has this habit of making Paul the hero of our tradition, the one who welcomed Gentiles like us into this sect of Judaism that was so influenced by Jesus of Nazareth. But I think we owe our spiritual heritage not to Paul, but to Ananias. For the one who was willing to trust his experience and make a brother out of an enemy. He was the one who risked his life to share the road with Paul, coming out of hiding, crossing town, embracing the one who had been responsible for the persecution and death of his friends, embracing this one, not as enemy, but as brother, and offering him forgiveness and healing and community. It's not Paul, but it's Ananias, who embodies the best of the teachings we have inherited and attributed to Jesus of Nazareth. To love our enemies, to bless those who curse us, to be a neighbor to anyone in need, to pray, forgive them, for they know not what they do. It's in Ananias that we see this embodiment of the non-violent teachings we've attributed to Jesus of Nazareth. And he could have exploited the moment. He could have taken advantage of Saul in his vulnerability. He could have treated Saul just as Saul had treated others. He could have abused him. He could have taunted him. He could have escalated the violence by getting even. He could have even, perhaps in his mind, justified killing Saul, but instead he calls him a brother. And he chose not to harm him. He chose to help him. And the only hands he laid on him were hospitable hands of acceptance. And then he risked his own life and the lives of the others who followed this way by bringing Saul into the very community that he had come there to destroy. Perhaps religion becomes so violent because it so easily ceases to be known as experience and becomes dogma. And dogma can never stand on its own. It always has to be defended. And so dogma becomes propaganda, and propaganda needs to be propped up, and propaganda becomes ideology, and ideology is a very, very narrow road we are so reluctant to share, except with those who walk like us and talk like us and look like us and think like us. But our 21st century high-speed travel, global village, our survival, and the survival of all life with which we share this magnificent planet, will largely depend on whether or not we can learn to share the road. Whether we can learn some new rules of the road. Whether we can learn to pay attention to the most vulnerable with whom we share the road. There'll always be those turtles and other slow travelers whose survival depends upon our attention and our responsiveness. There will always be the vulnerable travelers of the human and more than human kind with whom we share the road. Those who are dependent on our compassion and our kindness and our generosity. And so much of our survival as a species and the survival of our planet we call home depends on our capacity to give up the right way. The right way of governing, the right way of organizing, the right way of structuring our economics, the right way of asserting the power and the advantages we have, the right way of proclaiming exclusive truths and listening to each other, to learn to let life go on where and when it can, and what it will take for us to do that. So in this Thanksgiving Day, in this Thanksgiving weekend, in this Thanksgiving season, we pause to consider all with whom we're sharing the road. We pause to consider how we're traveling, where we're going, with whom we're sharing the road. We pause to consider what's seeking our attention, what's inviting our responsiveness, what's asking us to yield our sense of rightness, and how we can take our place as a respectful traveler, one species among the many, one spiritual being in a human experience, sharing the road with all that is. Our next evolutionary leap as a species may be our awakening that there is something beyond the survival of the fittest. Because the road we now find ourselves on is the road that can only be built together, can only be built cooperatively, where we can only travel if we can learn to travel safely together. So we take this silence to ponder how we're sharing the road. We're grateful for the way each of you contribute to this community. You contribute so much in the gift of your presence. You contribute with your talents, with your energy, with your time, and with your money. Some of you contribute each month by pre-authorized remittances that come directly out of your bank account. Others of you take this time and this opportunity to support us as you can. And in whatever way you are able to support the life and work of this community, this is our opportunity to do that just now as we also receive the gift of music. And we go to share the road in times of great joy and celebration, in times of deep sorrow and great confusion, in times of worry and anxiety. We share the road and we share the load. We go together and we go in the peace and strength and hope of who we are with one another. We go to walk in the light of great